It's great to have you with us again. I was thinking the other day about a simple question. What truly defines a person's worth? Is it the degree on their wall? The title on their business card? Or is it something deeper, something that can't be measured or easily seen? This channel is dedicated to exploring that very question through stories of ordinary people who find themselves in extraordinary situations. If you enjoy diving deep into stories that make you think and feel, please consider showing your support by giving this video a like and subscribing to our community. We'd also love to see your thoughts in the comments as the story unfolds. And speaking of worth, today's story is about a man whose value was constantly denied by everyone around him. They thought they knew who he was based on his job, but they had no idea they were looking at their own salvation. Here's what happened. You know, they say New York is the city where anyone can make it. I guess I used to believe that. But then you walk into a place like Sterling & Sons Publishing, and you realize some people are born at the finish line, while the rest of us are just lucky to get into the stadium. The lobby is like a cathedral built to worship old money. The air smells different up there, like aged paper, expensive leather, and a quiet, suffocating entitlement. Down in the basement, where I worked, it smelled like industrial coffee, cardboard, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that buzzes the soul right out of you. This was the mailroom, my little concrete kingdom, and for 2 years, I was its invisible prince. My name is Leo Vargas, and my job was simple: sort and deliver. But my real job, the one nobody knew about, was watching. I saw everything. You see, when you're the guy pushing the cart, people don't just look through you. They act like you're not even there. They'll argue about multi-million-dollar deals right in front of you. They'll leave printouts of panicked emails about collapsing projects in the copy machine. I saw the numbers. I saw the patterns. I saw a magnificent ship, Sterling & Sons, captained by a man who was drilling holes in the hull and calling it innovation. That man was Blake Sterling Jr. He was the heir to the throne. Handsome, impeccably dressed, with a Harvard MBA, he somehow managed to slip into every conversation. To Blake, I wasn't a person. I was a function, a pair of hands that delivered his packages from Amazon, a ghost that flattened itself against the wall whenever his royal presence graced the hallway. I should have been used to it, but there's a certain kind of humiliation in being made to feel like air that never quite loses its sting. This morning was a perfect example. I was making my first run to the executive floor, the cart piled high. Blake came marching down the hall, barking into his phone about some author. "Tell them the advance is non-negotiable," he said, his voice echoing off the marble. "We're Sterling & Sons, for God's sake, not some paperback mill." He brushed right past me, so close I could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive that seemed to mock the very air I was breathing. He never broke stride, never made eye contact. I just didn't exist. I watched him go, and I had to stop myself from laughing. Because here's the thing, the secret only an invisible man would know. I had seen the sales reports for the author he was talking about. She was the only writer on their entire roster whose sales were actually climbing. He wasn't protecting the brand. He was losing their only rising star out of sheer ego. Back in the basement, my coworker Sal, a guy who'd been there for 20 years and had the permanent slump to prove it, shook his head. "See the memo," he grunted, not looking up from his sorting. "Hiring freeze, and they're re-evaluating the pension." You know what that means. I knew exactly what it meant. "I saw the quarterly logistics reports," I said, my voice low. "They're spending 30% more on shipping for a 10% drop in volume. The numbers are bleeding out." Sal finally looked at me, with that familiar mix of pity and confusion. "You know, Leo, for a male guy, you sure don't talk like one. Ever think of trying to get a real job upstairs?" I just gave him a tired smile. It was a nice thought, like wondering if a fish ever thought about climbing a tree. They don't see guys like me, Sal. They hear my accent, they see this cart, and their brains just stop. That's the end of the story. He sighed, turning back. To his magazines. Yeah, you're probably right. Just keep your head down, kid. At least it's a steady paycheck. But I knew it wasn't. The numbers I saw every day told a different story. The hiring freeze wasn't a precaution. It was a tourniquet on a wound that was already septic. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the whole damn ship was going down. And the worst part? The truly crazy part? I was the only one who seemed to have a map of all the leaks. So every king needs his legacy, right? For Blake Sterling Jr., that legacy was supposed to be something called the Odyssey Project. It was his baby. A massive multi-million-dollar gamble on a series of historical fiction novels that were meant to be the next big thing. He'd thrown launch parties in London. He'd commissioned custom leather-bound editions. He'd basically done everything except make sure people actually wanted to read the damn things. And from my little vantage point in the basement, I saw the truth in the numbers. The project wasn't just failing. It was a black hole, sucking the company's money and lifeblood into it. I'd see the return shipment manifests, pallets upon pallets of unsold books coming back to the warehouse. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the driver was flooring the gas pedal and telling everyone what a great driver he was. I guess I had reached my limit. There's only so much incompetence you can witness before something inside you just snaps. I was doing a late mail run. The hallways on the executive floor were dead quiet. You know that kind of corporate silence? It's not peaceful, it's just empty. As I passed conference room B, the door was slightly ajar. And I heard Blake's voice, tight and furious. What do you mean the European distributor is pulling back? We had a contract. I just stopped. I don't know why. I should have kept walking. It was none of my business. But I stood there, hidden by the angle of the wall, and I listened. Inside, Blake was pacing like a caged animal in front of two marketing VPs who looked like they were about to face a firing squad. One of them, a woman named Carol, she was trying her best. Their advance orders were below projections, Blake, she said, her voice trembling. They're using the lack of market penetration clause. Blake just scoffed. So what's the genius plan, Carol? More ads? Let's throw another $1 million into the fire, shall we? The other guy suggested bundling. The books with bestsellers. A digital promotion, maybe. Blake looked like he was about to explode. That cheapens the brand. It makes us look desperate. We are not desperate. And that was it. That was the moment. Hearing him say that, knowing the truth of the numbers, knowing they were about to double down on a losing strategy out of pure pride. I couldn't take it. I don't know what came over me, man. It was like my feet moved on their own. I took one step forward and knocked softly on the doorframe. 3 heads snapped towards me. Blake's face went from anger to pure, unfiltered disgust. It was the look you give a bug you just found in your expensive salad. What do you want? He snapped. My heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs, but when I spoke, my voice came out steady. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Sterling. I heard you talking about the Odyssey Project. He just stared at me. And, he said, the word dripping with condescension. I took a breath. You're selling it wrong, I said. It was that simple. Your entire campaign is targeting the prestige literary crowd. The New York Times book review readers. But they're not the ones buying it. The data, the online sales summaries, the social media analytics from the warehouse printouts, it shows a younger audience. They read on their phones. They listen to history podcasts. The problem isn't the book, it's the package. You don't need to bundle it with other books. You need to relaunch it, digital first. Drop the ebook to $5 for a week. Get it into the hands of a few key influencers in the podcast world. You're trying to sell a steak to a vegetarian. For a second, there was just stunned silence. I could see on Carol's face, just for a flash, a look of dawning realization. The logic was so obvious it was almost insulting. But Blake wasn't stunned. He was incandescent with rage. It wasn't the anger of a boss whose strategy was questioned. It was the fury of a king whose divinity had been challenged by a peasant. He strode right up to me, his 6'2" frame towering over me, forcing me to crane my neck to look at him. "Who?" he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "The hell do you think you are? You sort mail, you push a cart. You read a few discarded memos and now you think you're a marketing guru?" He jabbed a hard finger into my chest. "Get out. And if I ever see you even looking at this conference room again, you'll be pushing a cart on the unemployment line. Do you understand me?" The entire world narrowed to his furious, entitled face. Every instinct screamed at me to say something, to defend my... The next morning, I was sorting through a pile of junk mail when a single, crisp envelope caught my eye. It was thick, creamy paper, the kind they only use on the top floor, and my name was typed on the front, Leo Vargas. Let me tell you, my stomach dropped to the floor. An official summons. Sal saw it over my shoulder and just let out a low whistle. Oh kid. The prince is calling for your head. It was nice knowing you, man." I swear, I could feel every eye in the mailroom on Emmy. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, my mind racing. I pictured myself getting fired, getting yelled at, being escorted out by security. By the time 4 p.m. rolled around, I had prepared myself for the worst. I knocked on the heavy oak door of the CEO's office, feeling like I was walking to my own execution. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The second was that Blake wasn't there. It was just the old man, Arthur Sterling Sr., sitting behind a desk so big that could land a helicopter on it. He looked frail, almost lost in the grandeur of his own office, but his eyes were sharp. Man, they were sharp. "Mr. Vargas." "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Close the door." I did as he said, my hands slick with sweat on the cold brass handle. He watched me for a long moment, like he was trying to read the fine print of my soul. "I was in my office yesterday afternoon," he said, steepling his fingers. "The walls are not as thick as my son believes." So that was it. He'd heard everything. The stupidly simple idea, the brutal shutdown, all of it. I just stood there, waiting for the axe to fall, but it never did. Instead, he continued, "Your observation about the Odyssey project. It was either the luckiest guess I have ever heard in my 50 years in this business, or it was based on something more." My heart was still pounding, but a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't an execution. It was something else. "It was based on the data, sir," I said, my voice even. "I see the return invoices from the warehouses. I see the social media engagement. Our EPORTS that marketing prints out. I see the shipping manifests. The story is all there, if you know how to read it." Arthur stared at me, his expression unreadable. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He was weighing the risk, the sheer absurdity of it all. Finally, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a binder, a thick, heavy monster of a thing, and slid it across the vast, polished desk. "This," he said, his voice flat, "is a raw data dump from our Midwest distribution center. 5 years of sales, logistics, returns, staffing costs, everything. My team of analysts, men with degrees from the same school my son went to, told me it's a chaotic, useless mess of numbers. They said it would take a team a month to find anything meaningful in it." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'd like to know what you see." It was a test. A crazy, impossible test. He was either setting me up to fail, or he was handing me the longest of long shots. I picked up the binder. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds, not with paper, but with expectation. "When do you need my analysis, sir?" I asked. A tiny ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Whenever you have one," he said. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I found an empty cubicle on the deserted accounting floor, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The cleaning lady, a kind woman named Maria, saw me and just nodded, as if she understood. "You work hard, Mio," was all she said before leaving me to the silence. I spread the pages out under the lamplight. It was exactly what he'd said, a nightmare of unfiltered data. Columns and rows that made no sense. But here's the thing about me, the secret I've never told anyone. For me, numbers aren't just numbers. They sing. They tell stories. When I look at a spreadsheet, I don't see figures. I see a narrative of successes, failures, lies, and truths. It's a language I was born to speak. I didn't use a computer. I didn't need one. My mind just started connecting the dots, building the models, seeing the patterns hidden in the noise. I filled a yellow legal pad with charts, calculations, and notes, fueled by vending machine coffee and a lifetime of feeling underestimated. You know how in the wild, an animal can just smell when a predator is near. It's not something you see or hear. It's a change in the air, a primal instinct that screams danger. Well, after my all-night session with that data binder, the air at Sterling & Sons changed for me. It started small. Old man Sterling would nod to me in the hallway, a gesture so small no one else would notice, but for him, it was like a royal decree. Then came the quick questions. He'd call me up to his office, the door always closed, and show me a new report. "Leo, what do you see here?" He'd ask, and a quick question would turn into an hour-long deep dive into the company's guts. I was still pushing my cart, still wearing my uniform, but I was living a double life. By day, I was the invisible mail clerk. By night, I was the old king's secret advisor. I knew it couldn't last. Secrets like that, in a place built on hierarchy, have a way of seeping out. And that's when I started to feel it. The stares. Before, people looked through me. Now they were looking at me. The other executives, Blake's buddies, would stop talking when I walked past. They'd watch me with this weird mix of confusion and hostility, like they were trying to figure out a puzzle they didn't like the look of. But Blake was different. He stopped ignoring me. Instead, he started staring at me with this cold, venomous glare whenever our paths crossed. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was something deeper. It was hatred, sure, but it was coated in fear. I realized he wasn't looking at the male guy anymore. He was looking at the man who had his father's ear. And in his world, that was a crime punishable by death. He saw me as a threat to his birthright, an intruder in his kingdom, and I knew, with a certainty that made the hairs on my arms stand up, that he wasn't going to let it go. You grow up where I did. You learn to feel it when you're being hunted. What I didn't know was how low he was, willing to stoop. I found out later what happened next. Blake took his two top cronies, Mark from sales and another guy named Peterson from acquisitions, out for one of those 3-hour steak lunches where they spend more on wine than I made in a week. They sat in a dark corner booth, a little boys' club of entitlement. Mark, ever the kiss-up, started. "Blake, what's going on with your father and the male guy? It's unsettling. It disrupts the chain of command. It doesn't look good for the brand." Blake just stabbed at his filet mignon. "It's not about the brand, Mark. It's about biology. The natural order of things," he seethed. "For 50 years, this company has been run by Sterlings, by men from our world. Now my father is listening to some punk from the Bronx with a high school diploma. It's an insult." Peterson chimed in, his voice slick. "So what's the play? We can't just let this happen. Blake finally looked up from his plate, a cruel, calculating smirk spreading across his face. It was the look of a predator that had finally chosen its weapon. "This guy is a ghost," he said, "but ghosts always have a past. I want you to find it. I want everything on him. I want to know where he lives, who his family is, if he's ever been arrested, if he's ever even had a parking ticket. Pay a private investigator. Use the corporate card, I don't care. I want you to dig. People. From that part of the city, there's always something. Some dirt, some mistake, some skeleton in the closet. And when you find it," he paused, taking a slow sip of his wine, "I want you to give it to me. My father needs a reminder of who he's dealing with. He needs to see that you can't trust people like that. It's time to take out the trash." And just like that, the conspiracy was born. It wasn't about protecting the company. It was about protecting their own privilege. They weren't afraid I would ruin Sterling and Sons. They were terrified I was the only one who could save it, and that my success would expose them for the insecure, incompetent frauds they truly were. They were coming for me. I could feel it in my bones. I just didn't know how, or when, the attack would come. The private investigator's file was thin, but for a guy like Blake Sterling Jr., it was as good as a silver bullet. My record was clean, squeaky clean, in fact. No drugs, no theft, not even a parking ticket. But Blake wasn't looking for a pattern. He was looking for a single moment, a weapon he could twist, and he found it. A sealed juvenile record from when I was 18. The charge read aggravated assault. The context, of course, wasn't in the headline. The fact that the guy I hit was 25 and had cornered my 15-year-old sister, Sophia, after school. The fact that his hands were all over her and she was crying. The fact that I did what any brother in the world would have done. None of that mattered to Blake. All he saw were the magic words that fit his narrative. He had his dirt. And he chose his moment to use it like a master torturer. It was a mid-level project review for the marketing team. He knew I had to drop off some urgent proofs, and he made sure his father, the old man, was sitting in on the meeting, just to observe. He set the trap, and I walked right into it. I entered the conference room, and the moment I put the package on the table, Blake held up his hand, a smug, theatrical gesture. "Leo, don't run off just yet. I have a question for you." The room went dead silent. 15 pairs of eyes all turned on me. I felt like a bug under a microscope. The old man just watched from the head of the table, his face a complete blank. "We've been talking about brand identity here," Blake said, his voice oozing a fake sincerity that made my skin crawl. "We've been discussing the kind of people who truly represent the Sterling and Sons name. Tell me, Leo, what do you think is the most important quality in an employee?" I knew it was a trap. Every instinct was screaming. "Honesty, I guess," I said, my voice quiet. "And hard work." Blake beamed, a predatory shark-like smile. "Honesty, I love that," he said, tapping the manila file in front of him. "So, in the spirit of honesty, why don't you tell the room a little something about your past? For example, what were you doing on the night of May 14th, 10 years ago?" My blood went cold. It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. The memory hit me like a physical blow, the sirens, the flashing lights, my sister's terrified face, the rage that felt so righteous and so terrifying at the same time. The worst night of my life. And he was serving it up as entertainment in a marketing meeting. I could feel the blood draining from my face. "I'm not sure that's relevant to my work here, Mr. Sterling," I managed to say, my voice tight. "Oh, I think it's very relevant," he pushed, leaning forward, savoring every second of my discomfort. "You see, we can't have people with a history of, let's call it violent tendencies, handling sensitive company materials. We need to maintain a certain standard. We need people we can trust. Not common street fighters from the ghetto. He said it. He actually said it. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Everyone was suddenly fascinated by their notepads, by the wood grain on the table, by anything other than my face. It was a public execution, and they were all just hoping to not get any blood on their shoes. In that moment, I had a choice. I could get angry, start yelling, try to explain about Sophia, but I saw the look in Blake's eyes. That's exactly what he wanted. He wanted the thug to act like a thug. He wanted me to prove him right. So I did the only thing I could. I took a deep breath, pictured my sister's face, not her terrified face from that night, but her smiling face at her high school graduation, and I let the anger go. I let it all drain away until there was nothing left but a cold, hard calm. I looked Blake straight in the eye. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even blink. If you have a problem with my work performance, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice low and steady, you can file a complaint with Human Resources. My past is none of your business. That night, after the public ambush in the conference room, I went home feeling hollowed out. I expected to be angry. I expected to feel humiliated. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the fight. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of a world where a guy like Blake Sterling Jr. could try to ruin a man's life as a casual power move. I was making myself a sandwich, just trying to feel normal, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no explanation. Just an address in Greenwich, Connecticut, and a time, 9 p.m. My heart started doing backflips. There was only one person it could be. I put on the only decent collared shirt I owned, got on a train, and took an Uber from the station that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. The Sterling estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of old stone and perfectly manicured hedges, the kind of place you only see in movies about people who have never had to worry about money a single day in their lives. A butler who looked older than the house itself opened the door and led me through rooms filled with art and antiques to a library that was bigger than my entire apartment. A fire was roaring in a massive stone fireplace, and sitting in a high-backed leather chair, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen him, was Arthur Sterling's R. He waited for the butler to leave, the silence stretching out between us, broken only by the crackle and pop of the burning logs. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Leo," he finally said, his voice raspy with an emotion I couldn't quite place. He gestured to the chair opposite him. I sat down, feeling completely out of place, a stray dog in a palace. He looked into the fire for a long moment before he spoke again. "What my son did today," he started, his voice thick with shame, "was a disgrace. It was the act of a weak, frightened boy, not a leader. It was cowardly, and it was cruel. And I want to apologize. On behalf of my family, I am truly sorry." I was floored. The king of this whole damn universe was apologizing to me. "You don't have to do that, sir," I said quietly, because what else could I say? "Yes, I do," he insisted, finally turning his gaze from the fire to me. His eyes were filled with a profound sadness. "For years, I've been blind. Willfully blind. I kept hoping that Blake would grow into the role, that the Sterling name itself would somehow shape him into the man this company needs. I was wrong." He took a slow breath. "He isn't just incompetent. That I could forgive. But he is cruel. And that cruelty, that need to punch down at anyone he perceives as a threat, that will be the death of this company." He stood up, his movements slow but deliberate, and walked over to a heavy, ornate desk that looked like it had been there since the American Revolution. He unlocked a small drawer and took out two things, a single black keycard with no markings and a small slip of paper, on which a long code was handwritten in elegant, old-fashioned cursive. He walked back and placed them on the small table between us. "This," he said, tapping the keycard, "is a master access card for the Sterling Tower. It opens every door. And this," he pushed the slip of paper towards me, "is my personal administrator password for the company's central servers. It gives you unrestricted access to everything. Every financial record, every hidden report, every contract, every single email sent between my executives for the past 15 years. The keys to the kingdom, as they say." I just stared at the items, my breath caught in my throat. This was insane. This was a level of trust I couldn't even comprehend. "What my son tried to do today was assassinate your character," Arthur said, his voice suddenly hard as steel. "He wanted to frame you as a thug to be thrown away. What I am asking you to do now is to save my company. I don't want you to just look at a department anymore, Leo. I want you to analyze the entire organism. The whole rotting thing. I want you to find the cancer that is killing us from the inside. And then, I want you to write me a prescription to cure it." He leaned forward, his old eyes burning with a desperate, fiery intensity. "My son and his friends, they look at you and they see a nobody from the mailroom. They see your accent and your background and they think they have you all figured out. I want you to show them what a nobody can do. I am giving you the truth, Leo, the raw, unfiltered data. Everything else is up to you. The fate of Sterling and Sons, my entire life's work, is in your hands now." I looked from his pleading. "You know how they say things fall apart? Slowly, then all at once. For 2 weeks I lived in the digital heart of the beast, the humming server room in the sub-basement, mapping out the sickness that was killing Sterling and Sons. I was working on a timeline, a careful, strategic plan. But the world doesn't wait for careful plans. The world has a funny way of just exploding. The final domino was a company called Quill and Ink, an educational publisher Blake was trying to buy. It was his big, flashy vanity project, The Deal. That was supposed to prove to his father and the world that he was a real player. I'd seen the numbers. I knew The Deal was a house of cards, built on a foundation of terrible loans and massively inflated valuations. I figured it would die a slow death in committee meetings. I was wrong. It died a very public, very brutal death on a Tuesday morning. The first sign was an alert on my phone from a financial news app. Then the email hit the company-wide server. Quill and Ink had walked away. Not only had they walked away, they had run into the arms of our biggest competitor for a lower price. And the press release they put out was a corporate kill shot. It cited Sterling's unstable financial outlook, and I kid you not, erratic leadership. The reaction was instantaneous. You could practically feel the panic cascade down from the top floor. The stock ticker went nuts, plunging 30% before the morning coffee was even cold. The phone started ringing off the hook, bankers, investors, journalists, all smelling blood in the water. And Blake? He completely lost it. He stormed through the executive floor, his face pale and sweaty, yelling at anyone who would listen. "It's market manipulation. They were sabotaged. This is a hostile attack." He was a captain blaming the iceberg for getting in his ship's way. He locked himself in his office, a failed king in a glass castle, leaving his terrified lieutenants to face the storm. But here's the crazy part, the part only I knew, sitting there in the cold, quiet hum of the servers. The deal falling through wasn't the disaster. It was the only thing that had saved them from immediate annihilation. My analysis had shown that the loan Blake had secured to buy Quill and Ink would have triggered covenants on all their other debts. It would have been a financial doomsday machine. The deal collapsing didn't sink the ship. It just revealed that the ship had been sinking all along. Quill and Ink's accountants had taken one look at Sterling's real books and run for their lives. Blake hadn't just failed to close the deal. He had publicly advertised to the entire world that his company was a catastrophic mess. By midday, place felt like a morgue. The energy, the confidence, the arrogance, it was all gone, replaced by a thick, heavy dread. Then, at exactly 1 p.m., a single email cut through the silence. It was from Arthur Sterling Sr. The subject line was just 3 words in all caps: emergency board meeting. The body of the email was even shorter. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Be prepared. That was it. No explanation, no agenda. It was a summons, a declaration of war. Down in my server room hideout, I got a different message on my phone. A private text from the old man. It was even simpler than his email. Just 5 words. It's time. Bring your work. I powered down my terminal. For 17 straight days, I had been preparing for this, fueled by coffee and a burning sense of purpose. I had dissected every lie, traced every dollar of waste, and built a plan. A radical, ruthless, and honest plan. I packed my laptop and my handwritten notes into a sleek leather briefcase Arthur had sent over by messenger a week ago, a silent, unspoken uniform for the battle to come. As I walked out of the server room, the chaos upstairs didn't matter anymore. The panic, the fear, the finger pointing, it was all just noise. Tomorrow morning, the noise would stop. And the truth would finally have its say. Let me tell you, walking into that boardroom on the top floor was like stepping into another dimension. The air was thick and cold, heavy with the smell of expensive coffee and pure, unadulterated fear. The room itself was designed to intimidate. A long mahogany table that felt a mile long, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down on all of New York City. Around that table sat the board of directors, 10 men and women with silver hair and grim faces who looked like they were attending the funeral of a loved one. And in a way, they were. Arthur Sterling Sr. sat at the head of the table, looking like a statue carved from granite, his face giving nothing away. At the front of the room, sweating through a suit that probably cost more than my car, was Blake Sterling Jr. His usual arrogant swagger was completely gone, replaced by the twitchy, desperate energy of a cornered animal. He was fumbling with a PowerPoint presentation, his last pathetic attempt to save his own skin. As you can see, he stammered, pointing a shaky laser at a slide that was nothing but corporate buzzwords and a meaningless graph pointing upwards. The market has reacted irrationally. This is a temporary downturn caused by external sabotage from our competitors. I could almost feel the collective eye roll in the room. He was blaming everyone but himself. My plan, he continued, his voice cracking, is to issue a strong press release reaffirming our stability, and to fast-track a smaller, strategic acquisition to project confidence and strength to the market. It was the most pathetic, empty plan I had ever heard. He was trying to fix a sinking battleship with a bucket of paint. Finally, an elderly woman on the board named Mrs. Prentice, a woman known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue, spoke up. Her voice was like cracking ice. "Project Confidence, Blake?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "Our creditors are on the phone with our CFO threatening to call in our loans. We are teetering on the edge of insolvency. And your plan is to issue a press release?" Blake just wilted under her gaze. The room was lost. The company was finished. That's when the old man made his move. He cleared his throat, a quiet sound that somehow boomed in the tomb-like silence. "That will be all, Blake. Thank you." Blake looked at his father, utterly confused. But I haven't finished explaining the synergy of the new acquisition target." Arthur's voice was flat, cold, and final. "You are finished," he said. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Humiliated, Blake stumbled back to his chair. Arthur surveyed the defeated faces around the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "you are right to be concerned. The company is on the brink. Not because of the market, but because of years of ego, mismanagement, and a profound refusal to look at the truth." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But I do not believe it is too late. For the past several weeks, I have Engaged a special strategic consultant to conduct a full deep dive analysis of this company. He has developed a turnaround plan. I ask that you give him 5 minutes of your time. He nodded towards the boardroom doors. They swung open silently, and I walked in. I wasn't wearing my mailroom uniform. Arthur had a suit sent to my apartment. The night before, a simple charcoal gray suit that fit perfectly. It felt like armor. All I carried was a slim laptop. The reaction was immediate. A wave of shock, confusion, and outright outrage swept the room. "Arthur, what is the meaning of this?" one board member demanded, pointing at me. "This is the mail boy." Blake shot to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. "Dad, have you lost your mind? What is he doing here?" I ignored them all. I walked to the front of the room, my footsteps the only sound. I plugged my laptop into the projector, and the screen behind me lit up, not with buzzwords, but with a terrifyingly complex chart of the company's cash flow crisis. I turned to face them, the 10 most powerful people in the company, and I met their stunned, hostile gazes. "Good morning," I said, and my voice, to my own surprise, was calm and clear. "My name is Leo Vargas. And for the past 17 days, I have read every financial report, every contract, and every internal audit of this company for the last decade. And Mr. Sterling is correct. You are on the verge of collapse." For the next hour I had them. I didn't just talk. I dissected the company layer by layer. I put the numbers on the screen, their numbers, and I made them look at the truth. I showed them how the Odyssey project had burned through $40 million with almost zero return. I brought up Blake's own emails where he approved sweetheart deals for his college buddies' companies. I put the quill and ink acquisition plan on the screen and showed them, line by line, how Blake had been willing to leverage the entire company, to risk everything, just in his own words, to make a splash in the trades. I wasn't just presenting data. I was performing an autopsy on 3 years of catastrophic leadership, and the cause of death was ego. Blake just sat there, shrinking in his chair, his face ashen. Then, when I had taken them to the very edge of the abyss, I pivoted. "But this company is not dead," I said. My last line hung in the air like a gunshot echo. "The basement, ma'am." But I had a good view of the whole building from there. For a heartbeat, the boardroom was completely silent, a room full of powerful people trying to process the fact that their entire world had just been turned upside down by the mail guy. The spell was broken by Arthur Sterling Sr. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the board. He looked directly at his son, and the warmth and love you'd expect a father to have was just gone. In its place was something cold, hard, and final. "Blake," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's sentence, "you are fired. Your access to the building will be revoked at noon. Security will escort you from the premises." Blake just stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Dad, you can't," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. "This is my company. My name is on the wall." The old man's reply was brutal. "Your name is a liability this company can no longer afford," he said, without a flicker of emotion. "You have disgraced it. You have nearly destroyed it. You are no longer welcome here." Blake looked desperately around the table, his eyes pleading for an ally, for someone to defend him. He found nothing. The men who had laughed at his jokes and backed his terrible ideas just days before were now staring intently at their hands, at their water glasses, anywhere but at him. They were rats leaving a sinking ship, and he was the captain they had just thrown overboard. It was Mrs. Prentice, the woman who had first challenged him, who delivered the final blow. She cleared her throat and addressed the old man. "Arthur," she said, her voice firm, "I move to immediately implement the restructuring plan as presented by Mr. Vargas. Furthermore, I move that we create the position of Chief Strategy Officer and offer it to Mr. Vargas with a compensation package that reflects the immense value he has just brought to this company. Another board member immediately barked, seconded. The vote was a formality. It was unanimous. It was over. As the reality of it all crashed down on him, Blake let out this choked, incredulous laugh. "You're replacing me? With him?" He pointed a shaking finger at me, his face a twisted mask of hatred and disbelief. "The mailboy? The thug you wanted me to fire?" Every eye in the room was on me. They wanted to see me gloat, to see me put the boot in. But I just felt tired. I looked at this broken, entitled man who had tried to ruin me and felt nothing but a strange kind of pity. "The numbers don't care where you come from, Blake," I said, my voice quiet. "They just are." Just then, 2 security guards entered the room, big guys in professional suits. It was the final humiliating touch. As they led Blake away, he wasn't the Prince of Sterling and Sons anymore. He was just a guy who had been fired, a ghost in the house his grandfather built. The fallout was a whirlwind. Before the day was over, Blake's cronies, Mark from sales, Peterson from acquisitions, the whole crew that had snickered at me and helped Blake dig for dirt, were all summoned to HR and fired for corporate malfeasance. The old man wasn't just cutting out the main tumor. He was excising every last trace of the cancer. As I packed up my laptop, the board members, one by one, came over to shake my hand. Their handshakes were firm, their eyes full of a dazed, newfound respect. It was surreal. Hours ago, these people wouldn't have acknowledged my existence. Now they were hanging on my every word. I walked out of that boardroom and down the executive hall, the same hall where I'd been invisible for years. It was different. Now, people were peering out of their offices, whispering, their faces a mix of awe and fear. As I passed the conference room where Blake had tried to assassinate my character, Carol, the marketing VP, stepped out. She stood in front of me, her face pale. "Leo," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What you did in there, it was righteous." We all just stood by and let him. "I'm sorry." It was a small thing, an apology from a bystander, but it felt huge. It was the first sign that things could actually change. I just nodded. "Let's get to work, Carol," I said. "We have a company to save." I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in building. I took the elevator up to the top floor and walked to the corner office. Blake's office. My office. I stood at the massive window, looking out at the same incredible view. But I knew I was seeing something different. Blake had looked out this window and seen a kingdom that belonged to him. I looked out, and I just saw the city tough, beautiful, and full of millions of other people who were just one lucky break away from showing the world who they really were. 6 months later, if you walked through the halls of Sterling and Sons, you wouldn't have recognized the place. And I don't just mean the fresh coat of paint. The fear was gone. That heavy, soul-crushing silence had been replaced by a low, buzzing energy, the sound of people actually excited to be at work. Ideas were flying around, people were collaborating, and for the first time in 3 years, the company had just posted a quarterly profit. My plan was working, but the numbers, for the first time in my life, weren't the most important thing to me. The biggest change was something you couldn't put on a spreadsheet. It was a program I'd started called the Sterling Scholars, a paid internship and scholarship for smart, hungry kids from underprivileged communities all over the city. A few days a week, I'd mentor this sharp kid from Queens, a girl who was smarter than half the executives I knew, but who never would have even gotten past the front desk in the old Sterling and Sons. I was building a bridge, a way for other kids like me to cross over. The old man, Arthur, was fully retired now. He'd come by the office sometimes, not as a boss, but just to walk the halls, a peaceful smile on his face. He'd sit in my office, and we'd talk for an hour, not about profit margins, but about the new voices we were publishing, about the future. He had saved his life's work by giving it away to the last person anyone expected. As for Blake, I heard through the grapevine he was selling high-end real estate down in Florida to wealthy retirees. He was telling everyone he'd left the stress of publishing to pursue his true passion. It was the most Blake Sterling Jr. ending imaginable. Failing upwards, insulated by a cushion of family money, completely incapable of admitting the truth. He hadn't been defeated. He'd just become irrelevant. And I realized that was a fate far worse than being fired. He'd lost the one thing that gave him his identity, his name on the wall. One afternoon, my assistant told me a recruiter from our biggest competitor was here to see me. The guy was slick, straight out of Central Casting, with a $1,000 suit and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He laid out an offer that was so big it felt like Monopoly money. Double my salary, a signing bonus that could buy my entire childhood apartment building, and the title of president. He leaned forward, going in for the kill. "Leo, you've worked a miracle here, we all know it," he said, his voice a confidential whisper. "But let's be honest, this is an old family company. Your name will never be on that wall. At our firm, you wouldn't just be a C-suite executive, you'd be a king." He thought he was offering me the world. He thought that's what this was all about, the power, the title, the recognition. He'd completely missed the point. I stood up and walked to my window, looking down at the city pulsing with life below. "You're right," I said, turning back to him. "My name will never be on that wall, but my legacy will be inside it." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt like I truly understood my own purpose. My legacy will be in the Sterling Scholars Program that gives that kid from Queens a real shot. It'll be in the single mom in accounting who knows her pension is secure, because this company is finally stable. It'll be in the groundbreaking books we're now publishing from diverse new authors, who never would have gotten their manuscripts. Read 2 years ago, I extended my hand to shake his. "Thank you for the offer. It's incredibly generous. But I'm not building a career anymore. I'm building a future. And my work, when you strip away all the noise of our lives, the job titles, the diplomas on the wall, the zip codes we come from, what are we really left with?" I think Leo's story gives us a powerful and deeply moving answer to that question. It's a profound reminder that our true value is not something that can be given to us by a family name or taken away by someone else's prejudice. It's something we forge ourselves in the quiet moments of hard work, in the integrity we show when no one is watching, and in the resilience we find when we're tested. It reminds me of the old saying that true gold does not fear the fire. Leo was put through the fire of humiliation and conspiracy, but his character, his true worth, only shone brighter. This story isn't just about one man's victory. It's a lesson in where we find our own strength. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice and the most arrogant personality, Leo's journey shows us the incredible power of quiet competence. Sometimes the most potent response to disrespect isn't a loud argument, but the undeniable, irrefutable evidence of our own excellence. On the other side, Blake's story is a stark cautionary tale. His prejudice wasn't just a moral failing. It was a strategic blindness. His arrogance made him incapable of seeing the talent right in front of him. And in the end, he became the architect of his own downfall. It's a perfect illustration of another timeless truth. You truly do reap what you sow. This story challenges us to look past the easy labels we place on others, and perhaps more importantly, on ourselves. Our worth is not in the cart we push, but in the map we can draw. Asterisk. This story really makes you think, doesn't it? We would love to hear your perspective in the comments below. What part of Leo's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Sharing your story